Okay, Chair, I make that 7 o'clock. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, councillors and officers and members of the public joining us on YouTube. Can I have apologies for absence?
Chair, I have apologies from Councillor Tom Beattie, Councillor Keane, Councillor Latter, Councillor Watt, and we have Councillors Beebe, DL and Welling substituting.
Thank you. I've had a message that Councillor McEwen is trying to join us at some point. Any declarations of interests? No? Minutes of the previous meeting. The committee is requested to approve the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 3rd of November 2020. Can I see a mover and a seconder?
Councillor Riles moved, Chair. Just waiting for a seconder.
Councillor DL.
Councillor DL.
Thank you.
All those in favour, Chair?
Thank you. Thank you for reminding me. All those in favour, please show your hands.
Thank you. That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you. Moving on to the first report, which is the corporate reasonable adjustments policy. And can I see Sam? Thank you, Sam.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening. This report seeks approval for the corporate reasonable adjustment policy to be used by our employees for customers and residents of the borough. Whilst the Council has been complying with our duty to meet obligations under the Equality Act of 2010, this policy formalises that process. The policy provides guidance on identifying how and when to make reasonable adjustments to our services. Reasonable adjustments are adjustments that are made specifically to remove barriers or disadvantages to enable someone that has a disability to access a service. This can be, for example, how we communicate with specific individuals, i.e. a language interpreter or a hearing impairment, or a change in policy or training. This policy aims to equip employees with the knowledge and the confidence on how to apply reasonable adjustments when required to our services. And this policy has been to the Joint Consultative Committee on the 5th of October and has been supported by the trade unions. The options to be considered within regards to this policy is to either to approve the corporate reasonable adjustment policy. In conclusion, whilst the Council has been complying with our duty to meet the obligations, this policy formalises that process. And with this policy in place, it's our intention to continue to deliver a fully accessible service to local residents, removing any barriers and disadvantages that they otherwise may encounter. And the recommendation is for the committee to approve the reasonable adjustment policy. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Can't see any hands, Paul. Can we move to the recommendation then? Can I see a mover for the recommendation, which is to approve the reasonable adjustment policy? Councillor Sims, Councillor Beebe. All those in favour?
That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you. Moving on to the parental bereavement leave, commonly known as Jack's Law. I believe that's yours again, Sam, is it?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So this report seeks approval to pay employees normal pay for the statutory leave period. So the parental bereavement leave and pay regulations are known as Jack Law. These came into place on the 6th of April of this year. And this Act gives a statutory right to a minimum of 2 weeks leave for all employed parents if they lose a child under the age of 18 or have a stillbirth from the 24th week of pregnancy. This allows parents to take leave as either a single block or over 2 weeks or 2 separate blocks of 1 week. Each can be taken at different times during 56 weeks after their child's death, which means that they can match their leave to the times when they need it most, including the first anniversary of the child's death. That right exists irrespective of how long they have been employed by the council. Parents with at least 26 weeks continuous service will also be entitled to statutory parental bereavement pay, and that is currently paid at the rate of £148.68 per week. However, in order to support our staff and to bring the council in line with other local authorities within North Northamptonshire, officers propose that employees receive normal pay for that statutory leave period. That will be above then the statutory minimum entitlement. This ensures that additional support is offered to the bereaved parents in the grieving process. Again, this was tabled at the Joint Consultative Committee on the 5th of October and has been supported by the trade unions. The options to be considered in this case is to approve the proposal for employees to receive normal pay during the statutory period, or pay the minimum statutory parental bereavement pay. In conclusion, with this in place, it will support our employees who are grieving parents by receiving normal pay for that statutory leave period and brings the council in line with other local authorities. The recommendation to the committee is to approve the proposal for employees to receive normal pay rather than the statutory minimum. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Sam. Are there any questions or comments? Councillor Sims?
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to say I welcome this report. I think it's the right thing to do. Clearly, folk who are going through this sort of stage in their lives and that would be very upset, and it's a very emotional time. They need all the support that they can get, and I think this is it's the right thing to do. So I'd be quite happy to support this report and move the motion forward. It's just a recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, David. Any other comments or questions? David's moved it. Can I see a seconder, please? Councillor DL, thank you. All those in favour?
That's carried, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Paul. Moving on to the next report, which is the Shire Lodge Cemetery Extension.
Yeah, sorry, can I intervene? I know Councillor Pengelly was trying to get on, and who's obviously the lead member for Environment. He was on and he's fallen out of the meeting, so he may be trying to get back on. Could I, as he's the lead member, could I perhaps suggest that we move to the budget monitoring report first?
I'm happy to do that if the members are happy with that. So we'll move on to the budget monitoring report. I know there are two members trying to get into the meeting at the moment. So that's Adrian.
Thank you, Chair. So usually when I present this, I usually start off by saying it's quite a good news story because we're working within budget, but obviously things are slightly different this year. So this is the position for the full year forecast based on 6 months actuals. So what we're saying is we think there's a £2.1 million shortfall in our budgets at the moment, in that's mainly through lost income, predominantly through leisure and through property, lost property rental income. In order to offset that, the government has given us 4 tranches of funding, which total 1.4 million. So we're looking at a loss at the moment on the budget of £730,000. This figure compares to £1.2 million reported at the end of the last quarter. The main reason why things have improved is because we've had further tranches of government funding. I am expecting that 729 to improve further because I'm expecting a government grant to come in for lost income later this week of about £570,000, which should put us at a budget deficit of about £160,000. So all in all, that's not too bad when you consider what we've gone through this year. And it's fair to say that the government has made good its promise to compensate councils largely for the lost income and pressures that they've faced. The only thing I would say at this stage is the figures that we're projecting exclude the current lockdown, because the current lockdown was announced and happened after we produced these figures, and it's almost impossible to predict what the effect of that lockdown will be before it happens. So I am expecting further grants that will come through to offset that, but I've no idea what will come through, how much there will be, and I can't predict at the moment what the loss of the current lockdown will be. So I expect the situation to get worse. I don't know how much it's going to get worse by, but I do expect there to be government funding to come in as well to try and offset that. In terms of the housing revenue account, we are predicting still a £400,000 shortfall, and that is almost entirely down to reduced income, predominantly through tenants having struggled and difficulty paying their rents. In terms of the capital programme, I'm not reporting any significant issues at this point. However, I would say to members, whilst we are predicting that the capital programme will be spent, because that's what budget holders are telling me, I would be absolutely astonished if that bears true at the end of the year. Now, the obvious question that members will raise from that is, well, what happens to those unspent funds? And I have to say at this stage, we've had no clear steer from the unitary as to whether those budgets will be carried forward or not. So that's the position I'm reporting at the moment. I doubt whether all that capital I just can't believe it'll be, it's never usually spent. I can't believe it will be this year. What will happen to those funds? I don't know. I'm happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you, Adrian. It's as we know, it's a difficult time for our residents. What's support do you know that's in place for people having difficulty with their council tax and rent?
Well, there's seven tranches of funding that I'm aware of off the top of my head that's been available to businesses. 3 were made available around about May, June time. Those were amounts of £25,000, £10,000 and a discretionary pot, which we allocated as well. There's been 4 further announcements of funding through to businesses. That's due to the national lockdown, and there's also 2 further pots available due to local restrictions, and Northamptonshire's into a tier 2. So that will allow some further grant funding to be available to businesses. In terms of private individuals, aside from the furloughing, they're also entitled to a £500 hardship fund if they're having to self-isolate as a result of advice from the track and trace people. And I think that's pretty much it. There's quite a lot on offer to people, but obviously it only goes some way to touching the surface when you look at the national picture.
Thank you, Adrian. Are there any comments or questions, Adrian, on the budget? I don't see any hands
I don't see anyone wishing to come in, Chair.
at the moment. Can we move to the recommendations then? I see a mover
Councillor Elliston, Chair.
and a seconder. Councillor
Councillor
Riles. All those in favour of receiving the recommendations? Thank you.
That's passed, Chair.
We're going to move back now to the cemetery report. I believe Councillor Pengelly and Councillor McEwen overcome the technology difficulties. Is it Ian?
Yes, Chair. Before I introduce the report, Chair, may I just introduce Dylan Smith, who's the project manager for the Charlotte Cemetery Extension report, who's attending the meeting tonight to answer any technical questions that members might have that I might not be able to answer. Yes, moving to the report. The report is for members to consider agreeing a drawdown of reserves to fund the additional costs of extending Charlotte Cemetery. The current cemetery is nearing capacity. It's got likely about 18 months to 2 years left of spare burial capacity. We agreed an extension of Charlotte Cemetery following a feasibility report that was done some time ago in February 2019 with APSI Solutions, and since then we've progressed to get planning permission to extend the existing cemetery into playing fields to the west of the existing cemetery. A capital fund of 750,000 for 1920 was approved for the cemetery extension. And in securing planning permission and other associated costs, the current spend against that budget is about 99,500, with a further 120,000 to come in terms of contract administration and project management and service diversion costs, which leaves a circa a budget of 530,000 for construction in terms of the capital works. We've tendered the capital works, and you can see from the report, bottom of page 1, going over to page 2, the price of the tender submissions. All of the tender submissions came back and were significantly above budget, which left a considerable shortfall in the working budget to actually complete the capital works. So as a consequence, we've reviewed the specification, and we've been through the tender bids. We've done some element of value engineering of what we think effectively we might be able to remove from the bids to reduce costs prior to potentially going out to re-tender. And there's a number of options that we've presented in the report, options 1, 2, 3 and 4. The preferred option of officers is option 2, which would require an additional funding of capital from reserves of £570,000. That would deliver most of the works that are identified as per the actual plan in Appendix 1. That the key exception really would be the car park proposed in terms of the extension to the east of the existing cemetery on the plan. And there'd be some minor changes as well around the specification for hard and soft landscaping as part of that preferred option. So subject to committee's determination of the report would also have to be notified to the Shadow Executive Committee, given the amount of the proposed budget increase being in addition to the agreed capital programme. And clearly, as identified in the report, there is a risk in terms of the future delivery of this scheme, given the fact that the works won't commence on site this financial year, but likely will be contracted this financial year for a start early in the spring. So moving to the recommendation, Chair, the recommendation is that committee approve the funding of £570,000 from council reserves to allow officers to re-tender works to extend the cemetery based on option 2 as set out in the report being the preferred way forward. Thank you. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Ian. Questions? Councillor Pengelly, can you try and use your blue hands, because it's a bit easier for me to see on the screen. Yeah. Councillor Pengelly.
I'm a Celtic fan. I'll never have a blue hand, Chair. So moving forward, we've already gave a lot upon this scheme since we've been looking at this for many years. Not since Ian said there was a report from APSI in 2016, if you remember. And time and time again, we've cut things off of this. A lot of people wanted a crematorium up there. That's not happening. A lot of people wanted a chapel arrest up there. That's not happening. And if we don't spend money now on getting something fit for purpose for the people of the town where I live, then we'll never get it done. There's no point saying, let's do it. Let's do some of the work now and then leave a lot of the work till later on when everything's already done. So my view is, let's go for option 3. Spend 870,000. As Dylan knows, there's a lot of work that our ground maintenance team can do themselves on the shrubs and stuff like that. That was part of the tender. The tender itself, I was a bit upset that the people that bid for it, from what I understand, were big companies. It wasn't bid for by local contractual companies. If you look on it, it's tarmacking and drainage. There's a lot of Corby companies, Kettering and Wellingborough companies that can do this kind of work at a lot better price. The people that came in and won the work, from what I understand, were those that would have sold it on for other people to do. Let's get this done correctly. Let's spend the money. Let's get a fit for purpose cemetery that the people in Corby can be proud of. The cemetery's come on leaps and bounds since the shared service came in. It's a cemetery that looks good, and I just think that we should spend the money now, and I'd ask for support on that.
Councillor McGee.
Thank you, Chair. You'll notice as a Rangers fan, I put the blue hand up. That I fully support what Mark's saying, Chair. I would not be happy with the car parking disappearing there. I think, you know, especially on a burial day, we have a lot of family and friends trying to park, mourners that are attending a funeral, and I'd be extremely upset if people couldn't park there, Chair. And you know, I've fought for many years on another authority about local companies getting opportunities to have large contracts, large commissioning jobs. I know we have to go through the European Journal, etc., on commissioning, but we can always put something in about something waiting to local businesses, because that's important, because it's local people, it's local businesses that's keeping that within Corby, within Northamptonshire, and I think that's extremely important. But Chair, I would go as far as to say that I would be happy to move option 3 on, option 3, because I know Adrian might not be happy with us spending some more money being the finance officer, but you know, by the time we get the extra grants, etc., for the COVID, we will still have good reserves for a small authority moving into the unitary. And we want to do what's right for Corby and the people of Corby, and putting that little bit extra in, because it's only about 300,000 overall of what's been asked for in option 2. We would be doing the right thing and make sure that it's suitable for future use. So I would move option 3, Chair.
Before I bring Councillor Sims in, do officers want to respond to the comments so far? Adrian?
If I may, Chair, am I on?
Yeah.
If I may, Chair, I think Councillor McGee's doing me a harsh disservice there. I've never suggested for a moment that members can't spend the council's funds. In fact, that's what it's there for. I've no objection if members wish to go down this route. This is the council's money. It's members that decide where it goes, and if that's what you want to spend it on, it's there to be spent. So yeah, I feel more like Father Christmas than Scrooge.
Thank you. Ian or Dylan, have you got any comments to make?
Chair, the only comment I would make is clearly we have picked up from the first tender exercise in relation to the fact that the bidders were largely project management company focused, and there was an absence of local civils bidding for the contract. So if we were to go back out to tender again, clearly we're going to seek to do some further engagement with local companies to try and encourage local civils companies to bid, and we hope that would provide better value for money in the tender submissions.
I think that's quite important during this time as well, that we do support our local businesses. Councillor Sims.
Thank you, Chair. I don't have any problem raising my blue hand. Having said that, I'm not a football supporter, I'm a Tory supporter, as you're well aware. Going on to more serious matters now. Obviously, I go up to the cemetery quite a lot, as yours probably I can imagine, with my mother and father not long passing, and that. It does say in the report we have about 18 months to 2 years spare capacity left. I've seen a lot of movement up there. You know, more graves being dug and filled recently, more quickly than what we'd normally expect. So I don't know if that is still relevant now or if that's less. I do also believe that we have to provide this service for Corby. We do need the car park, and has already been stated. I think that's extremely important. And I think we need a good service. And I'm a little bit, I'd like to ask Adrian, and not Mr. Scrooge, as he seems to wants to be called. I'm not sure if he wants to be called that, but I'm not sure I'd call him that. But what I would say is, going for option 3, would he be comfortable with that, with the extra expenditure and that? And by doing that, and also it was mentioned about retendering to improve to get local companies in, which I'm all for, as long as they comply with the regulations. It's good to support local companies in the local community and hopefully get better value for money. But would that make the process longer and cause us problems in delivering before we run out of space? I'd like to ask that. I'd also like to know. No, I think the other question was answered actually by someone else. But would like to know about the legal position, and that it does mention in the report, you know, about the legal side of things and that. But what I don't know is there any covenants on that site, and that's still going to be dealt with? It's going to drag it out longer and cost us more money. And that is the council confident we can deliver on that? Because legals and that can sometimes stretch for quite some time, and the longer they go on, mostly the more they cost.
Adrian, do you want to respond first? I think there's something in the report about the covenant, but somebody might want to pick that up. Adrian?
Thank you, Chair. I mean, all I can comment on here is the financial side of things. In an answer to Councillor Sims' question, I'm entirely comfortable with the extra funds. You've got several £1 million worth in reserves. It's up to you what you want to do with those reserves. So I've got no issues with it whatsoever.
Can I just come back on that, please?
Yes, go ahead, David.
With Adrian's comment on that, then I know we've got several million in reserves, but as we know, we don't know what's going to happen in the future, and I'm sure that will be more than plenty. We've only got a few months left of this authority, in all honesty. So with that, I'm quite happy to support for tender free.
Jonathan?
Sorry, for option free. I apologise, for option free.
Jonathan?
Thank you, Chair. Just to pick up on the covenant question, there was a restriction on the title, the council's title, but that situation was resolved earlier this year. So there's no encumbrance legally in terms of us moving forward with implementing the planning consent that's in place.
Thank you. Ian?
Chair, I was going to invite Dylan to come back in relation to the capacity issue and the whether the timeline for tendering would be affected by trying to engage with local companies.
Thank you. Dylan, do you want to comment?
Thanks, Ian. Yeah, the timeline is we do a monthly track of the usage of the cemetery. So yeah, we're fairly robust. That is obviously in the current climate. We don't entirely know what it means, but our tracking of those numbers and figures suggests we've got certainly 18 months of capacity there. Tendering won't be prolonged with going for local contractors. We did signpost to a number of local contractors at the start, and in fact, from what I understand, speaking to a couple of them, they actually did provide a price to some of these project management things. So contractors. So one of the bits that, again, with our procurement colleagues is just making sure that we're signposting it in the appropriate way, and there's nothing in the tender pack that's putting them off overly. But yeah, it won't make any difference to the timescale. You're trying to focus on local contractors.
Thank you. And just to be sure that we are covering for diversity as well within the cemetery, aren't we? With a Muslim area.
Yes.
And thank you.
Yeah, we've spoken with them on a couple of occasions and kept them informed.
Yep. Okay.
Can I just come back there at one point, please?
Yes, David.
No, thank you. And I realised there was a paragraph in there about the covenants on that site. What I was referring to, if I should have been more clearer, is I wanted to just to be sure that was all there was, because I understand that part of Rockingham Triangle area, which is further up, of course, but within that vicinity, there is covenants from Rockingham Estates up there. I take it doesn't affect that side where you are?
Jonathan?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, that was the covenant I was referring to, and that matter has been resolved.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor McGee.
Thank you, Chair. And you know, just to say to Adrian, finance officer, I would never call him Scrooge. He's been an excellent officer to Corby Borough Council, and I appreciate everything he's done, and I mean that, Adrian. So I would never call you Scrooge. The other thing I'm glad to hear is that Dylan's saying that it wouldn't be held up by trying to point more towards local businesses. And I think that's important. Although we have to be stringent in our commissioning, we also have to give them an opportunity to have a contract that's not overbearing, so that it's only pointed towards these big multinationals. So I'm sure we can find some way of trying to attract local companies and local labour for a contract in Corby. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. If there's no more questions.
Can I move the report? This isn't a vanity project. We're not doing fountains and things like that some councils are. This is something that's needed for the town, and I'd like to support John's proposal on option 3 and move forward.
We need to change the recommendation then.
Yeah.
Paul, can you help us there with some wording?
Yeah. Well, Councillor McGee's moved and Councillor Pengelly seconded that we approve option 3 as written on page 2 of the report. to approve the additional funding of 870,000, etc. As written.
Is that clear to everyone? Yes? Can we move, well, we've got John and Mark that have moved and seconded. Can we move to the vote then, please? All those in favour? Okay, Paul?
That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you. And I think that concludes our business for tonight, or have I left anything off? No?
No,
I
no.
think that's it then. Thank you very much, officers and members, for your attendance tonight. And I don't, is there any football on tonight? Are you guys, you've been talking about football.
Just
but-
Adrian's team Aberdeen. Oh, sorry.
It's putting up the Christmas decorations now, Chair. That's the night.
See you later, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you very
Thank
much,
you.
everybody.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Hi, everyone.
Thank you,
Thank
Chair.
you.
Cheerio.